Right, so this is going to be a wee recap video on distance, speed and time. We covered this a little bit before the holidays in a live video session, but because of the internet it wasn't very clear and got a little blurry at times. So I'm going to record this now, that you've got something to look back at if you're struggling with any questions or want to go over it again. So at the end of the session, we're going to look at these 3 questions and I'll go through a worked solution for each of them. But beforehand, we're just going to cover the basics of distance, speed, time, get the important bits down that we need to answer any question, and will make our life much easier going on. So, the first thing to do, and is our most important thing for distance, speed and time, is to draw our distance, speed, time triangle. So, we're going to draw a triangle like this with 3 sections in it, and we're going to put distance, speed and time into one of those sections. So what we're going to do first is put a D at the top here for distance, an S there for speed and a T there for time. So D equals distance. Now there's many different units for distance, okay? We've got a lot of things we can call it. The most common ones we'll come across will be meters. We might have miles, or we might have kilometers. This works for all of them. We just need to be careful when we're doing it, but our answer matches the units we were being asked for. Okay, now our S equals speed. And again, we've got a bunch of different units we could use for our speed. Okay, so we could have meters per second. This little slash here, that means per. So that's meters you're travelling every second, per second. We could have miles per hour. So instead of doing the slash, we can also write a P for per. But we tend to only use that P when it's miles per hour. With every other unit, for example, kilometers per hour, we use that slash like we did here with meters per second. Then finally, the T in that triangle equals your time. Okay, again, we've got a couple. The 2 main ones we'll always be using though are seconds and hours. You could get a tricky question that asks it in minutes. General advice there would be to change those minutes into hours. For example, 30 minutes is half an hour or 0.5 hours. Okay, but now we've got our triangle and we know what each of those things are, we need to know how to use the triangle, how this will actually help us answer distance, speed, time questions. So what we do is we cover up the part of a triangle that we're trying to find out. So if I'm trying to work out the distance of something, okay, I cover up the distance part of my triangle. Now I've got S and T. This is just like algebra. S and T are next to each other, so that means they're timesed together. So that means if I want to work out a distance, which is this bit here, I have to do the speed times by the time. Okay. If I want to work out the speed, I'm going to cover up the S. Now, I've got distance on top of time here, so it's like a fraction, and that means divide. So whatever's on the top goes first, and we divide that by what's on the bottom of the fraction. So speed equals distance divided by time. Now, finally, if I want to work out time, I cover up that part of it. So if I cover up the T, that's telling me that time is distance on top of speed. So distance is the top of my fraction, and I'm going to divide that by the bottom. So time equals distance divided by speed. Now doing that will allow you to answer every type of distance, speed, time question you could come across. Okay? Another really important bit before we do this is to talk about units, okay? They need to match what's in the question. So let's look at a wee example now, thinking about how we use units, okay? Let's look at a distance. If we're trying to work out a distance, okay? We know there's going to be a speed involved, and we know there's going to be a time. If we're thinking about the units, we don't really care what the values of these are, we only care what their units are. So let's have a look. If our speed was in kilometers per hour, and our time was in hours, that means our distance here, that needs to match what the other units are. So our distance here needs to be kilometers because the question was in kilometers. Okay? If we knew a distance and we know that's in miles, we know the speed and we know that's in miles per hour. The time then, once again, it has to match. So this has got no indication of a time units in it, but this one does. It's miles per hour. Miles you're travelling every hour. So your time also has to be in hours. It's a quick way to check you've done it right, if everything matches. It can also help you if you've forgotten your triangle up here. So if we have a look at this unit here, speed is in kilometers per hour. That means it's kilometers, which is a distance up here on the top, divided by, because that's what the slash means, divided by time, which is on the bottom. So if you've forgotten your triangle, you could work it out knowing your units for speed. Okay, so now let's put all that together and let's have a look at some of these questions. Okay, so let's just bring this over here. So question 1, how far would I travel in 3 hours if my speed was 11 kilometers per hour? Nice and easy one to start with, and so what I'm going to do is put my triangle right at the top of the page so I don't forget it, and I'd recommend you do this. You can do this going into any exams, even later on in the school, and you'll come across lots of triangles like this, especially if you do subjects like physics. Okay, so question 1. How we should always set these out is to write down the things we have and what we're trying to find out. So if we look back at this, how far would I travel? I'm trying to work out a distance. Okay, but I don't know it yet, so we'll put a little question mark. I do know a time and I do know a speed. So I can write down what my speed is, 11 kilometers per hour, and I can write down what my time is, 3 hours. And then let's look at my triangle to work out the equation. Okay, so distance means I'm going to cover up the d. That leaves me with speed times time. So distance equals speed times time. So it's going to be 11 times 3, which equals 33. Okay, but we must include units. Especially for these types of questions, units are just as important as the actual number value. Okay, so it's a distance, and the question had kilometers in it, so the units for my distance answer are going to be kilometers. So there I would travel 33 kilometers in 3 hours, as if I was going 11 kilometers every hour. Question 2. What speed was a car going if it took 1.5 hours to travel 30 miles? Okay, so it is speed I'm trying to find out. So let's put a little question mark for S. Okay, I know distance. It tells me that the distance is 30 miles. So let's put 30 miles there next to D. And I know time because it tells me that it took 1.5 hours. Now, to make this easy, I'm not going to write it like this when I actually work it out. To make this easy for us to do on a calculator, decimals are easier than fractions. So 1.5, if you'll remember, going from fractions to decimals, that is 1.5 hours. Okay, so we're trying to work out speed. That means I cover up speed in my equation, little triangle there. It's distance divided by time, because the d is on top, okay? So speed equals distance divided by time, and again we just swap in the numbers we have. So instead of writing d for distance, I'm going to write 30. Instead of writing t for time, I'm going to write 1.5. Okay, and then we'll work this out. You could do it on a calculator, but if we do 30 divided by 1.5, we get 20. Now, what are our units here? 20 what? So the distance was in miles, the time was in hours, so our speed is going to be in miles per hour. So I was travelling 20 miles every hour. Now, lastly, let's look at question 3, which has a wee bit more going on in it, but we can work out exactly the same because we have our triangle. So, question 3. I leave home at 2 p.m. If I go at a speed of 5 miles per hour and I live 2.5 miles away, when will I get home? Okay, so what I'm trying to work out here is a time. So let's put a little question mark here for the t. Okay, it does tell me a time in the question, but don't get confused and put that in because it's asking when will I get home. So this time will be important, but that's not what the question is asking us. Okay, speed. It tells that we go at a speed of 5 miles per hour. And the distance we've travelled is 2.5 miles. So, time. Now, we should be well used to using this triangle by now, but just to make it clear, if we're trying to work out time, we cover that up in the triangle. And that tells me then that I've got distance on top divided by speed. Remember, because the bottom bit is the bottom of your fraction, so that's what you're going to be dividing by. So time equals distance divided by speed. My distance I've gone is 2.5. Divided by, and my speed was 5 miles per hour. So it's divided by 5. So again, you could use a calculator when you're doing this, but 2.5 divided by 5 is 0.5, or a half. Okay. Now, again, we need to look at the units here. Miles doesn't tell us much about the time units, but our speed was in miles per hour here. Okay, so that means our time is going to be in hours. This doesn't quite answer the question though. This tells us that the journey took 0.5 hours. But what the question asked was, when will I get home? So what we then need to do is do another little sum. So if I left home at 2 p.m. and my journey took 0.5 hours, what time would I get home? So my time I get home, that will equal time I started at, 2 p.m. 2 p.m. plus half an hour, okay? Plus 0.5 hours, okay? Sorry, there, 0.5 hours. Here, we need to be careful. How many minutes is 0.5 hours, okay? It's half an hour, that's 30 minutes. So that means I get home at 2:30 p.m. PM, okay? Some people will see this and they'll get a little bit confused and they'll say that it's 2:50 PM because they've seen that 0.5, okay? This is wrong. It is not 2:50 PM. It is 2:30 PM because 0.5 is half an hour, which is 30 minutes or 2:30. Okay, so that's all you need for covering distance, speed and time, and I hope that was nice and clear and will help you with the work I'm going to get you to do this week. Okay, so the key things to remember are use your triangle here to work out your equation, and then just be careful with your units. Make sure they match and are sensible. Okay, so right, goodbye.